He married her for money, but her vows turned the whole church silent. The grand church was filled with the murmur of guests settling into their seats, sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows casting colorful patterns on the polished marble floors. The ornate chandeliers sparkled overhead, adding to the air of celebration and opulence. Lucas, the groom, stood at the altar wearing a sharp tuxedo, his confident smile perfectly rehearsed, as if he already knew the outcome of this day. Beside him, Elena, the bride, looked radiant in her elegant gown, but her eyes betrayed a deep, guarded emotion, something she was holding tightly within. As the ceremony progressed, the priest's voice echoed softly, guiding the couple through the traditional vows. Then it was Elena's turn. She took a breath, steadying herself, and as her lips parted, the atmosphere in the church shifted palpably. Instead of the usual promises of love and devotion, her words were filled with quiet strength and unexpected truths that cut through the joyous facade like a knife. The guests, expecting a typical declaration, fell into a stunned, reverent silence, their faces frozen in shock. Her voice carried with calm conviction, every word carefully chosen to reveal a secret and confront the hidden motives behind the marriage. The crowd sat motionless, caught between disbelief and awe, as the reality of her vows unsettled their preconceived notions. This moment was not just a wedding, it was a reckoning, a turning point that exposed layers of deception and challenged the very foundation of what the ceremony represented. The silent church became a powerful symbol of the upheaval about to unfold, signaling that this marriage was far from ordinary and that Elena's voice would change everything. Elena was often seen as the quintessential wealthy heiress, poised, impeccably dressed, and seemingly untouched by the struggles that marked everyday life for most. To the outside world, she was the perfect embodiment of privilege and grace, living in a grand estate, surrounded by luxury and admiration. But beneath that polished surface was a woman whose story was far more complicated and profound than anyone could imagine. From a young age, Elena had faced loss that many could not fathom. Her parents, once prosperous and loving, had perished unexpectedly in a tragic accident when she was still a teenager. This devastating event forced her into a life of responsibility and sacrifice that shaped her resilience and tenacity. Suddenly, she was thrust into managing family affairs, navigating complex financial landscapes, and making decisions that would determine the future of her legacy. Far from the idle socialite she was perceived to be, Elena was intelligent and fiercely independent. She had spent years quietly building a foundation of strength, educating herself in business, law, and the subtle art of navigating social hierarchies. Her motivations were driven by more than wealth. She sought control over her own destiny and a way to honor the sacrifices of those she had lost. Dreams of genuine connection, respect, and freedom burned quietly beneath her composed exterior. Elena's true nature was often overlooked or misunderstood by those around her, especially in circles where appearances mattered more than substance. People saw a bride to be bought and sold, a prize to be claimed, but they underestimated the depth of her spirit and the power she wielded beneath the surface. She was ready not just to play the part assigned to her but to rewrite the narrative altogether, on her own terms, with strength born from hardship and a fierce will to claim her own voice in a world determined to silence it. Lucas grew up in a small town where opportunities seemed scarce and the path to success uncertain. Raised in a modest household, he learned early on that money and status were the keys to respect and power, things his family had never truly enjoyed. From a young age, Lucas harbored a deep ambition to escape his humble beginnings and live a life filled with luxury and influence. But unlike those who sought to build their fortunes through hard work or innovation, Lucas saw an easier, more direct path, marrying into wealth. Charming and articulate, Lucas perfected the art of winning people over with his smooth words and polished demeanor. He knew how to present himself as the ideal suitor, respectful, attentive, and seemingly sincere. But behind that charm was a calculating mind, constantly strategizing how to secure his position and expand his control. Elena's fortune wasn't just a prize to him, it was the foundation for everything he wanted to build, a lifestyle of ease, power, and social prestige. Lucas didn't just focus on Elena herself. He skillfully manipulated those around her, including family members and their social circle, weaving a web of influence and deceit. He played the role of the devoted fiancé in public, while quietly sowing discord and securing allies who would support his ambitions. His plans extended far beyond the wedding day. He envisioned controlling Elena's wealth, managing her assets, and steering her family's legacy according to his desires. Yet, beneath the confident exterior, Lucas was not without fear. He knew the stakes were high and that Elena's intelligence and strength posed a threat to his schemes. This fear made him all the more determined to maintain control, resorting to manipulation and subtle intimidation to keep his grip tight. Lucas's persona was a complex mix of charm and calculation, a man willing to do whatever it took to claim the life he believed was rightfully his, regardless of the cost to those around him. The wedding day unfolded like a scene from a fairy tale, but beneath the glittering surface lay a carefully constructed facade. The grand cathedral was adorned with cascading white roses, delicate lace drapes, and shimmering chandeliers that cast a soft, golden glow over the gathered guests. High society figures in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos filled every pew, their whispered conversations blending with the soft hum of an elegant string quartet playing in the background. Photographers flitted between groups, capturing every perfect moment destined for social media and society pages alike. From the outside, the event seemed flawless, an exquisite display of wealth, tradition, and celebration. Crystal glasses clinked during the champagne toast, and the aroma of gourmet delicacies filled the air. The floral arrangements were lush and meticulously arranged, symbolizing fertility and prosperity. The ceremonial arch, entwined with ivy and white lilies, framed the altar where Elena and Lucas stood, poised to unite their lives in the eyes of God and society. Yet, beneath the veneer of glamour and grace, a subtle tension simmered, invisible to most but palpable to those who knew where to look. Elena's poised smile barely masked the turmoil beneath, the flicker of doubt in her eyes, the tightness of her clenched fists, the brief hesitation in her step as she approached the altar. Her heart weighed heavily with the knowledge that this day was not a celebration of love, but a performance dictated by expectation and obligation. In stark contrast, Lucas radiated superficial joy, his broad smile practiced and his every gesture rehearsed to perfection. He basked in the attention, confident in the power his new status would bring. His eyes never met Elena's during the ceremony. Instead, they scanned the crowd, reveling in the approval of the elite who had come to witness the union. The ceremony itself was steeped in tradition, ancient vows recited, blessings bestowed, and rituals performed with solemnity, but it felt less like a sacred rite and more like a carefully staged play. Every element underscored the power dynamics at work, the control, the submission, and the unspoken battles beneath polite smiles and formal protocols. This setting, rich in symbolism and pageantry, foreshadowed the dramatic turning point that would soon shatter the illusion of perfection and reveal the raw truths hidden behind the wedding's dazzling facade. Elena's journey to this pivotal wedding day was shaped by a complex web of family expectations, personal sacrifices, and unspoken pressures that had slowly tightened their grip over the years. Growing up as the only daughter of a powerful, wealthy family, she was acutely aware from a young age that her life would be dictated not by her own dreams but by the needs and ambitions of those around her. Her parents, particularly her father, saw her as the key to securing their legacy, someone to forge strategic alliances through marriage rather than a daughter to support unconditionally. Throughout her youth, Elena experienced moments of quiet rebellion, small acts of resistance like pursuing education in the arts or advocating for causes she believed in, but these flickers of independence were often stifled by the overwhelming weight of tradition and duty. Her family's expectations hovered over her like a storm cloud, and as she approached adulthood, the pressure to marry well became impossible to ignore. Offers came and went, but none felt right, none touched her heart. When Lucas entered her life, his charm and ambition were immediately apparent. Her family saw him as the perfect candidate, handsome, ambitious, and ready to embrace the role of a successful heir by her side. But Elena sensed something darker beneath his polished exterior, an opportunist hungry for wealth and status rather than genuine connection. Despite the doubts that gnawed at her, she felt trapped by circumstance. Financial responsibilities, family honor, and a deep desire to protect her younger siblings weighed heavily on her decision to proceed. Warnings from close friends and subtle instincts whispered caution, yet Elena chose to suppress them, convincing herself that she could navigate the challenges ahead. The emotional complexity of this choice, caught between hope and fear, duty and desire, set the stage for the dramatic revelation in her vows. As the memories of this journey flooded her mind in the quiet moments before the ceremony, the audience is left on edge, sensing that Elena's words will carry far more than the typical promises of love. Elena's vows began with the familiar cadence of a traditional wedding promise, her voice steady but filled with an unmistakable resolve. Yet, as she spoke, it became clear that these were no ordinary vows. Instead of pledging eternal love and devotion, Elena's words peeled back the polished facade of the ceremony and laid bare a deeper truth that no one in the grand church was prepared to hear. She spoke directly to Lucas, addressing him not as a loving partner but as a man whose intentions had been driven by greed and selfish ambition. With a measured calmness, Elena recounted how she had seen through the carefully constructed mask Lucas wore, the charming smiles, the whispered assurances meant to manipulate both her and their social circle. She exposed his calculated plans to control her fortune and his willingness to sacrifice genuine connection for status and wealth. Her words pierced through the murmurs of the gathered guests, each phrase a blow to the image of perfection the groom and his family had worked so hard to project. But Elena's vows were more than an accusation, they were a bold reclaiming of her voice and agency. She declared her refusal to be a pawn in a game of wealth and power, and her determination to live life on her own terms. Her speech challenged the audience to rethink their assumptions about marriage, love, and respect, calling out the societal norms that often silence women's truths and compel them to accept less than they deserve. As she spoke, the atmosphere in the church shifted dramatically. Faces that had been smiling with anticipation froze in disbelief, whispers faded to silence, and the grandeur of the ceremony seemed to dim under the weight of her declaration. Lucas stood stunned, his confident demeanor unraveling as the realization of being publicly exposed sank in. The silence that followed was deafening, a collective breath held in shock and awe, marking a powerful turning point not only in the ceremony but in the lives of everyone present. Elena's vows shattered expectations and set in motion a wave of change that no one could ignore. The moment Elena finished her vows, the church was engulfed in a heavy silence that felt charged with electricity, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Then, like a sudden crack in a still pond, reactions rippled outward, each more intense than the last. Members of both families exchanged glances filled with shock, confusion, and fury. Some of Elena's relatives whispered hurriedly, disbelief etched across their faces, struggling to reconcile the poised woman they thought they knew with the fierce truth she had just unleashed. On the other side, Lucas's family reacted with palpable anger and indignation, their whispers quickly escalating into pointed murmurs and sharp glares aimed at Elena. His mother's face flushed crimson, her eyes narrowing as she hissed accusations under her breath. "How dare she embarrass us like this?" The groom himself, initially stunned, quickly scrambled to regain his composure. He stepped forward, attempting to salvage the ceremony with a rehearsed smile and soothing words, but the shift in the room was undeniable. The guests' eyes no longer gleamed with celebration. Instead, many began exchanging uneasy looks, questioning what they had accepted without thought. Among the congregation, a few began to murmur quietly, their expressions thoughtful, some wrestling with newfound doubts about the fairness of the system they had supported, others shocked at the stark reality Elena's words had unveiled. The tension grew thick as whispered conversations spread like wildfire, and a clear divide formed between those who clung to tradition and those beginning to sense the need for change. Elena stood tall, her gaze unwavering, embodying the strength and resolve that had brought her to this moment. Despite the fury swirling around her, she remained calm, knowing that her courageous declaration had shaken the foundations of a deeply entrenched social order. Her act of defiance was not just a personal stand but a catalyst, a challenge that forced everyone present to confront uncomfortable truths about power, greed, and the silence that had allowed injustice to thrive. In that charged atmosphere, It became clear that nothing would ever be the same again. But at first, Lucas's reaction is a mask of practiced charm and confidence. He forces a tight smile, straightening his posture as if to assert dominance, hoping to convince the crowd, and himself, that nothing is amiss. He quickly tries to dismiss Elena's words as a moment of emotional outburst or misunderstanding, addressing the guests with smooth, rehearsed reassurances that the ceremony will continue without interruption. But beneath the surface, the cracks are already forming. As the whispers grow louder and eyes shift away from him, Lucas feels a creeping panic rise. His carefully constructed world, the future he envisioned, built on Elena's wealth and the facade of a perfect union, begins to crumble before his eyes. The confidence that once fueled his every move is replaced by a gnawing vulnerability he rarely allows himself to feel. Alone in his thoughts, he grapples with the reality that his manipulation and lies have been exposed publicly and that the consequences may be far worse than he imagined. His relationships with key family members and allies start to fray instantly. His mother, once a staunch supporter, now regards him with cold disappointment and veiled anger, questioning how he could have jeopardized their reputations so blatantly. Trusted friends begin to distance themselves, sensing the shift in power and fearing association with scandal. Even those who benefited from his schemes begin to hesitate, wary of the fallout. Privately, Lucas battles between maintaining his arrogant facade and confronting the truth he's tried so hard to hide. The desperation to control the narrative clashes with moments of stark self-reflection. For the first time, he must reckon not only with the collapse of his carefully laid plans but also with the possibility that he underestimated Elena, and the strength it takes to shatter the silence he relied on. The scene paints a man unraveling, caught between pride and panic, and sets the stage for his next moves in this unfolding drama. Even as the church buzzes with shock and tension, Elena begins to notice subtle but powerful shifts in the crowd. Among the guests, a few familiar faces emerge, friends who have long admired her strength, family members quietly nodding in approval, and even some strangers moved by the courage she displayed. These supporters, though diverse in background and connection to Elena, share a common belief in her right to speak out and reclaim her life. One of Elena's closest friends, who had always sensed the strain beneath the surface, steps forward with a heartfelt embrace, silently communicating solidarity. A cousin who once urged caution now stands firmly by her side, their eyes meeting in mutual understanding. Even some guests, initially unsure, begin whispering words of encouragement, inspired by the defiance and clarity in Elena's vows. This growing circle of allies represents more than just personal support, it signals a broader shift in the community's mindset. Their presence and quiet acts of encouragement become a lifeline for Elena, reminding her she is not alone. This support reinforces the story's deeper message about empowerment, courage, and the possibility of change even in the most rigid traditions. As Elena absorbs this unexpected wave of solidarity, it strengthens her resolve to move forward with purpose. The encouragement from these allies becomes a foundation for her new path, one that extends far beyond the wedding day and into a future where her voice will no longer be silenced. As the initial shock from Elena's vows begins to fade, the ripple effects reach far beyond the church walls. Whispers and rumors start swirling, and soon, long-buried secrets about Lucas's past begin to surface. Elena, empowered by her bold declaration, starts digging deeper into the web of lies and manipulation that Lucas has spun, not just around her, but around many others who trusted him. She uncovers evidence of financial fraud, deceitful business deals, and emotional manipulation that Lucas carefully concealed under a veneer of charm and respectability. Witnesses, former acquaintances, disgruntled business partners, and even family members step forward, offering testimony that paints a picture of a man driven by greed and control. This growing dossier of proof reveals a pattern of calculated exploitation, far more extensive than anyone in their social circle could have imagined. Elena's courage to confront these truths not only exposes Lucas's schemes but also challenges the very foundations of the social and familial structures that enabled him. This revelation sends shockwaves through their community, forcing people to question their assumptions and alliances. The story here deepens, showing that personal bravery can ignite a broader reckoning. Elena's unyielding pursuit of justice shines a light on corruption hidden in plain sight, emphasizing how standing up for oneself can unravel even the most carefully guarded facades. The confrontation with Lucas's past becomes a pivotal moment, one where silence is broken and the path toward accountability begins. Elena's decision marks a profound turning point in her life. No longer willing to be defined by others' expectations or manipulated by Lucas's greed, she takes a firm stand to reclaim her identity and future. The weight of betrayal, pain, and disappointment fuels her resolve rather than diminishes it. She begins to dismantle the narrative that once confined her, stepping away from the shadows of wealth and status that had boxed her in. With newfound clarity, Elena embarks on a journey of self-discovery and empowerment. She embraces independence, seeking not just freedom from Lucas's control but the creation of a life shaped entirely by her own values and dreams. The chapter captures her transformation from a passive figure caught in the machinations of others into a powerful woman who commands her own destiny. This shift is both emotional and practical. Elena makes decisions that prioritize her well-being, strengthens her relationships with true allies, and sets clear boundaries with those who once tried to dictate her path. The community begins to recognize her courage, and she becomes a symbol of resilience. Ultimately, Elena's new beginning is about more than just personal liberation. It's about rewriting her story on her own terms and inspiring others to do the same. Her strength and determination illuminate a future full of possibility, hope, and dignity.